Hey everyone, in this video I'll be sharing with you exactly how you should be structuring your influencer promotions to make sure that they are successful. And I'll be sharing the exact 7 vital stages of a promotion that your creative should have in order to drive the highest ROI possible. Okay, so first of all, let's start off with what is the ideal structure for a promotion. Well, I have to say that this varies significantly from product to product. So if you think about it, running a 1-minute video-wide creative for a fitness product is much more straightforward than selling a jewelry product for 1 minute. But what I am going to share in this video is 7 essential parts that every single creative can have regardless of the product, even though you might need to play around with the way that some of these things are said. And potentially if you have a product that isn't necessarily applicable for one of these stages, you need to play around with the wording as well. Ideally, this structure is for products that you can actually see results from, like a before and after, so the influencer can do a demonstration of the product and the audience can physically see how the product works. But if that isn't the case with your product, that's still fine. We can still make it work. We just need to change up a few things, and you might need to cut a few bits of this out. But these 7 things are still essential to make sure all your promotions have in the first place. One other super important part of this is that the influencer should be comfortable using your product on camera. If it's a product they don't seem genuinely interested in using, then it's very hard to pitch it to an audience. So whatever your product is, make sure you're actually sending it from the influencer who wants to be promoting that product or is at least in that niche. Because otherwise it's going to be really hard to sell a product to an audience if the influencer themselves is not genuinely caring about that specific product. But let's just say that your product does tick this criteria of being something that people can actually see being used, as well as being genuinely liked by the influencer. Then here are the exact 7 steps of your promotion that you should follow in order to maximize your ROI. So let's start with stage 1, pre-ad warm-up. Now what do I mean by this? Whenever we run an ad nowadays, we pretty much always make sure that we're warming up the audience before we pitch the product to them aggressively. The last thing you should look to do is just randomly force a product in front of an influencer's audience. The most effective thing that you can do in order to maximize your ROI is first of all organically work it into your influencer's stories or their YouTube videos and then go about pitching your product. If you think about it, if you're following your favorite YouTuber and one day in the middle of nowhere they mention this random brand for 1 minute, you've never heard of this brand before, you've never seen this influencer mention this brand before, but all of a sudden they're promoting this brand really aggressively for 1 minute, chances are you won't be that convinced that the influencer is genuinely promoting that product. They might have just been paid a lot and you would kind of skip by it. But if you see an influencer continuously use the product for a certain period of time without actually promoting it, and then one day they decide to pitch it to their audience, then the audience is much more likely to believe that that promotion is a genuine promotion, something that the influencer genuinely wants to promote because they like the product. Now this does require you to pay your influencer extra just to get them to show the product on their YouTube channel or maybe on their stories 2 or 3 times before you actually go up promoting it. But I can assure you that this will definitely drive higher conversion rates just because the audience can actually tell that the influencer is promoting a genuine product that they genuinely like and use. And if you look at it from a more long-term perspective as well, if you're building a brand, you want to make sure that you're not working with influencers who just want to promote your product for the sake of getting paid. You want to make sure you work with influencers who genuinely like your product. And if you're running a huge promotion, let's say you pay $10,000 to an influencer, you really do not want them to be randomly mentioning this product out of nowhere one day. You want them to slowly, naturally integrate it into maybe one of their videos. They can put it in the background just as like a natural placement, not even pushing the product, not advertising it at all, just simply placing it in the background, or maybe they post a quick 15-second story slide, not even mentioning the brand or anything, just showing the product, it being used, something along those lines. And then a few days later, you can go ahead and run your ad. And by that time, at least a portion of the audience would have already seen the influencer use the product before, and they would get the idea that the promotion itself is much more genuine than if they were to randomly promote it out of the blue. So you can see I did mention that this stage is kind of fine to skip when you're testing a new product or if you're completely new to it, just because in order to get your influencer to do this, you do need to pay them extra. And maybe if you're running on a budget, you can't exactly afford to pay extra just to make sure your promotion gets a better ROI. So that does make sense, but I would say if you're at scale, you want to make sure you're always warming up your audience before selling the product to them aggressively. Make sure they've seen your product before, they've seen it being used, or just organically paste on one of the influencer's videos or on a story, and then go ahead and pitch the product. And if you're smart in the negotiation stage, one thing that you can do, let's say an influencer says that their rate for a promotion would be $5,000 on Instagram, you can go ahead and ask if you can slip in this warm-up slide into that deal as well for the same price. And essentially, even though it might not seem like a lot because it's a 15-second slide where you're not even promoting the product, what you're actually doing is warming up the audience for when they will get the product promoted to them, and you're likely to see a better conversion rate and swipe up rate, like I said. So that's stage 1. Honestly, I would never skip this stage if you're scaling. If you're just testing the waters or you're a complete newbie and you don't have much budget, it would be okay to skip the warm-up because you can still drive conversions and do an effective promotion without it. but it's very important in my opinion, especially if you're building a brand, to do warm-ups every single time you run a promotion. Okay, so stage number 2, we're moving into the actual ad now. And this is the initial hook via story. Now what do I mean by this? Now what you want to do as soon as the ad begins is get people hooked into something. And you don't want the ad to actually seem like an ad. You want to disguise your ad as content and just hook as many eyeballs as possible. I see loads of people making this mistake where they go ahead and put a discount code and a swipe up link on the first slide or the first few seconds of their ad itself. And you should never do that, because as soon as people see that, they will drop off. What you want to do is hook people into your ad initially by telling a story, and explain how this works. I made a whole nother video specifically about how to bridge an influencer and the audience to your product through storytelling and relatability, so I'll put a card up to that video right now. But essentially what you want to do is get the influencer to share a personal experience, something that the audience can relate to, which can be a general problem or something that the influencer went through, and then you want to pitch the solution to that problem, which is the product. Now essentially this story can be any sort of experience that the influencer went to, and it has to be related to your product in some way. So let's say if you're selling a fitness product, you can go ahead and get the influencer to share a story about their own personal fitness journey, how they might have tried loads of products in the past, but none of them give them the desired result they were looking for until they tried your product and your product did something special for them. It helped them do X, Y, Z in a record period of time, which they weren't able to do before. Whatever applies for your product, of course. But basically any sort of personal experience that will get the audience engaged and hooked onto the story is a perfect opening to your actual ad. So this would probably last the first 15 to 30 seconds maximum. You don't want to go longer than that because people will drop off if you do a really long story. Just something to get the majority of eyeballs hooked in whilst you transition into promoting your product at the very end. So stage 3 is creating relatability. Essentially what you want to do as soon as you tell the story is also get your audience feel connected to the influencer. And the way you can do that is by saying something along the lines of, if you're like me, you've also ... And essentially the influencer is trying to make the audience feel like they're in the influencer's shoe because they have both experienced a similar problem. And obviously if the influencer can convince their audience that they're in a similar situation, they've had a similar problem, and now they can find a similar solution, which is your product, then they're much more likely to convert on your offer, just because you're leveraging the existing trust that the audience has with the influencer and kind of creating a bridge between them and your product. So essentially the way it would work is for the first 15 to 30 seconds of the ad, you should get people hooked in, keep them watching throughout the entire story, and then you should basically create some sort of relatability between the audience and the influencer by getting the influencer to mention a problem that applies to a lot of different people. So essentially what's happening when you're saying something like, if you're like me, you've also experienced XYZ problem, is you're getting people to remember why they follow the influence in the first place, which in most situations is because either personality-wise or looks-wise or characteristics-wise, they have some sort of similarity. And when you leverage that similarity and get people to understand that they're exactly like the influencer, they're in the same shoes as them, then later when the influencer goes ahead and mentions that the solution to their problem was your product, then the audience will pretty much believe the exact same thing. And that moves us on to stage number 4, which is connecting the bridges. And essentially what we want to do here is connect the bridge from the influencer's story to our product by basically saying how the solution to their problems in their story was our product. So what you've done in the initial 30 seconds-ish of the ad is get people hooked onto the story and also feel a similar way to how the influencer feels, because you've got them feeling relatable to each other. And once people have that similar pain that the influencer feels, then you go ahead and pitch why your product is awesome and the solution that they were looking for. They're obviously much more likely to believe that your product genuinely works. And then this is when you would go ahead and transition into the demo stage of your ad. And of course, stage number 5 is a demo and explanation. This should be from anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds. Essentially all we're doing here, after we've connected the bridges between the story, our product and the influencer's audience, is essentially saying exactly why our product is the best there is. So we want to explain the benefits, the features, whatever makes sense for your specific product, of course, and also do a demo of the product. So like I said, if it's a product where you can actually see the before and after or see it in action, then that's perfect for video content because the audience can actually see the product works as it's been described to do. I would always make sure that this section isn't too long because this is kind of where the salesy parts begin and people tend to drop off at this stage. So if you make this content too long, then people will lose interest. They'll skip forward to another story ad or skip forward to a different video. So you want to make sure this is only 15 to 30 seconds long. And the best way to do this time effectively is just to make sure that the influencer is speaking about the benefits and features whilst the demo is going on, so that they don't ramble on for a really long time. So once the demo is finished, you will transition into the hard pitch, which is stage number 6. And this should be a minimum of 15 seconds. I see too many people doing it like 5 seconds, one call to action, and that's just not enough time to actually convert people to swipe up or click a link. If you don't have at least 15 seconds on a strong hard pitch at the very end of your promotion, you'll probably have a low click-through rate, and even though people might have understood that the product works wonders for the influencers, they won't be motivated to go ahead and click the button, because people need to be told multiple times what they should be doing before they actually do it. One way to really force an audience to click a link or swipe up is by adding in urgency and scarcity into your offer. So you can mention stuff like the offer being time sensitive, expiring in the next 24 hours, as well as there being a bonus for the first 50 customers or 100 customers who use the coupon code. We usually implement both scarcity and urgency tactics into a hard pitch just to really drive home the message of actually swiping up right now. Now, the reason why you might not see bigger brands doing this is because they aren't exactly focused on direct ROI from the influencer promotions. So pretty much only e-commerce stores that are really focused on generating the direct ROI will go ahead and pitch aggressively, which of course, if you want the biggest ROAS from your ads, you want to be doing this. Just because other people aren't doing it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It's because they have other goals in mind. These bigger brands can usually afford to spend much more on promotions upfront and not necessarily need to see a direct ROI upfront in order to justify running the ad in the first place. And stage number 7 is justification, and this is another really huge part, and if you don't nail the justification, then you're going to see a huge drop off at the end of your ads. What you want to make sure is that there's a clear reason as to why people should swipe up now. Nowadays, everyone gives 50% off, and you see that number thrown around a lot, so people aren't necessarily motivated to buy just because they see a 50% off product. What you want to do is convince the audience in their mind why they should buy, and that can't be just a discount code. It has to be a logical reason. For example, if you just cross 15,000 happy customers, you can go ahead and mention that you're running a sale just because you crossed 15,000 happy customers and it expires in the next 24 hours. Now that's a unique reason. That's a justification behind why you're getting 50% off. Another reason might be that you're celebrating a special event, or maybe you're doing a new product launch. Whatever it might be, it must be unique to your situation. You just need to convince the audience a logical reason why, and they're more likely to justify their purchase decision at that specific moment because they know why they need to be buying specifically then. I can assure you that if you give clear justification as to why you're running a promotion, you're much more likely to have a higher click-through rate than if you had no justification and just a simple offer. We've seen click-through rates as high as 25%, which might seem insane, but it is very much possible because we gave a clear justification as to why people really need to swipe up at that exact moment. And what you do right after the justification is give another call to action. So this is the second one. So you should have 2 clear call to actions and the justification should be sandwiched in between. And this should make up at least 15 seconds of a really strong hard pitch. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's the exact structure that we use for hundreds of promotions that we've done, and we've generated millions of pounds in revenue just for this exact same format. So let's go over again just to make sure you're 100% clear. Stage 1 will be the warm-up, which is pre-ad. This isn't 100% necessary to do, especially if you're just a beginner, you're tight on budget, or you're just testing a product. But if you're going to a huge influencer and you're paying them a huge amount of money, you really want to make sure that the audience has kind of seen the product several times before it's actually being pitched to them, so that they're more comfortable in buying the product because they know that the promotion is genuine, rather than just like a one-off cash grab for the influencer. Stage 2, and this is when the actual promotion starts, you want to make sure that you initially hook your audience into a story, and you want to make sure that the audience doesn't realize that this is an ad. You want to keep as many eyeballs as possible watching these stories or videos if you're running a YouTube video for as long as possible. And from stage 2, you would transition into stage 3, and this is where you would get the audience to feel like they're in the influencer's shoe because they've also experienced the same generic problem. And step 4 is where you connect both stage 2 and 3 to your product itself. You want the influencer to explain exactly how your product was a solution to their problem, and by this point the audience would also be on board with them as well. And stage 5, this is where you would do the actual demonstration of the product. You would show the benefits and the features of the item, as well as getting the influencer to show kind of a before and after, or the product actually in use, so that the audience understands how it works. Stage 6, this should be a transition to a hard pitch where you should give a clear, strong call to action. And one thing to make clear here is that you should never put swipe up links or discount codes or anything like that in the first 30 seconds-ish of your story ads or your video ads, just because people will be aware that this is an ad and they'll tend to drop off. Like I said, you want to keep as many eyeballs watching for as long as possible. And stage 7, this is the justification. This is the reason behind why you're running the sale at that specific moment. And again, you would sandwich this in between 2 different call to actions. So you would say swipe up now or click the link, then you would give a justification, and then you would repeat the call to action again, just to make sure that people actually go ahead and do the action that you want them to do. And that would be it, guys. That's the exact structure that we always follow when we run ads. I really recommend you to try this out and see how it goes for you. I can almost guarantee you that most people running ads right now are following a really random structure, or they're just letting their influencer do whatever they want. They make their own creative and they don't really line out exactly how the promotion should be going. And if you're running influencer ads right now and you're wondering why it might not be working for you, well, it's probably because your creatives aren't structured properly, and the creative is usually the biggest part of the promotion. Because if you have a great influencer but rubbish creative with a rubbish structure, then chances are the promotion will tank. You really want to make sure that you've nailed the structure. And the structure that I've outlined here works pretty much all the time, so you want to make sure that you're following something similar. Obviously, you can adapt it a bit more to suit your product, because like I said, jewelry products and fashion products, it's a bit harder to tell a story for those products. But what you can do instead for products that you can't actually tell stories about is actually do a longer demonstration, so people understand the product a bit more, they like it a bit more, and then switch to the pitch at the very end. And probably the ads doesn't have to be as long as a physical product that you can actually see results for. But that's it for this video, guys. I hope you did find that helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Instagram. I put my handle on the screen right there. Also drop it down in the comment section down below and I'll get back to you. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I share really helpful e-commerce content like this. If you want to see more influencer marketing related videos, go ahead to my playlist. I have a bunch of really helpful videos there for you guys. And if you did find the video helpful, make sure you drop a like down below, because I would appreciate that. With that being said, guys, I will see you on the next one.
Entrepreneur gang, yeah. Entrepreneur gang, yeah. Entrepreneur gang, yeah. Entrepreneur gang. This is for my entrepreneur gang.